We've been learning on source of life the last couple of weeks, and we touched a few things. One is tree of life. We all need life. Life is precious. Um, Life is so precious that who can we spend all the money to get this life, to live a little life that is 70, 100, 120 years, right? Especially you go to a man or a woman, doesn't matter how poor they are, they would sell everything they have to preserve one of those life. I've seen people sell everything, even going bankrupt to save one life. When it comes to your child's life, and you find that the child is going to die, it doesn't matter how wicked, how bad you are, would sell everything to save that one life. That is the life we're talking about. That is just a mortal human beings, temporary short life. If that, how precious this life is, we have to understand how much God wants our life to be. The biggest gift of God is God giving us life eternal. One is a life that is long enough. And second, most important, I emphasize this again, abundant life, living in abundance. It is very important to live an abundant life. Now, life has many factors. We'll go into one by one, but if you don't have it in abundance, there are some things that we need to work on. When you plant a tree or a garden or a whatever, one of those plants, or to bear good fruit, what we do, we cultivate the ground, right? We break the ground, we put more fertilizers, and we make sure everything that we put goes in favor so that it produces better fruit. Then we prune the tree, water it, keep it away from all pests, protect it so that it bears good fruit, to be fruitful, so that there is more fruit in it. So we've touched base on tree of life. So probably some of you have the notes. If not, go back and check it out. So there are 4 things I emphasized on that. So work on it. Don't simply listen to this word and let it go. Go back. Lord, I want life in abundance, so much that it will be flowing from me. Path of life. We spoke on path of life. Last one was fountain of life. How does it flow? I would like to emphasize 4 things, if God willing, today. One is fountain of life, well of life, way of life, and spring of life. Again, how it springs out of you. So keep this in mind. I'll go back, brush back a little bit on fountain of life, because spring of life and fountain of life goes together on line to line. So I want to emphasize that too again. So when we spoke on fountain of life, we read Psalm 36 verse 9. If someone can help me with the verses, would be wonderful. Psalm 36 verse 9 and Proverbs 13:14, and one of you can take Proverbs 14:27. Proverbs 13:14, Psalm 36:9, and Proverbs 14:27. Psalm 36:9. If you got it, please read for me. Yes.
For with you is the fountain of life, in your light we see light.
One more time, please. 36:9.
For with you is the fountain of life.
For in you is the fountain of life.
In your light we see light.
In your light we see life, right? In you is the fountain of life. So everything springs from Him. And through His light seeing from His perspective, seeing from Him, you see life. Every life flows from Him. So focus that in mind. Proverbs 13:14. Proverbs 13:14. To avoid snares of death.
The law of the wise is a fountain of life, to turn one away from the snares of death.
The law of repeat that for me one more time.
The law of the wise is
The-
a fountain of life,
Law of wise is a fountain of life.
to turn one away from the snares of death.
So we have to take the words of wisdom to turn away from snares of death. Again, Proverbs 14:27 says, fear of the Lord that leads to obedience and worship. Here it talks about fear of the Lord leads to obedience and worship. I just want to touch one base here. Fear of the Lord. How does the fear of the Lord come to you? Thank you. Any other reflection?
How does the fear of the Lord come to you?
Fear. How does fear of the Lord come? Give you life experience so we can open that word, like open it to our practical life. These words are sometimes very simple but very hidden, so we understand. It's wisdom. Through practical experience, it comes to a reality.
When you see His power, His majesty, or something serious, like when Ananias and Sapphira drop dead, that brings the fear of the Lord.
Brings fear of the Lord. All the answers are correct, but I learned something very new. I wake up early to pray, but when I sit to pray, I can't pray all the time. Some days I pray so effectively, and some days I just can't pray. I'm just trying to put this into your heart. In my life, I started analyzing, why is it some days not very effective like other days? I've been waking up early. Nowadays, my timing to wake up has so much changed that I wake up at 2:50. And it's been repeated for the last few days. Even though I wake up at 2:45, 2:50, it's very hard to be on my knees to pray continuously. If somebody asks me why, I'm not that I don't have enough problems to pray for. I got a lot of problems I can pray about. I can take a list and I can write it down one by one. But still, you can't pray. You can read it all. You can write it down. I can say, these are my problems, Lord. But there is something that has to come into you. In Genesis, Isaac says a word. This is the word Isaac uses. God of Abraham. Now Jacob uses the word. Jacob uses this word, and he says, now Abraham said Lord, called God. Yeah, he called upon the name of the Lord. But Isaac uses God of Abraham. But by the time Jacob uses the word in Genesis, he says, God of Abraham. That means God revealed himself to Abraham. Second, fear of Isaac and my God. That is, Isaac trembled before God, fearfully served him. Now I'm going to bring it to my life. I never had this realization. The days that I cry and I cry and I cry is when I go through such a trial that my heart is crushed. I'm broken, I'm shattered. I'm pressed in every way. And I sit there that I have no strength to stand up. If you watch yesterday's movie that we watched, The Freedom, the Amazing Grace song, they brand people, right? I was watching that part. They're branding people. You know how they brand people? How? They burn a piece of metal and make it hot, red hot, and then they stamp that on their body. You know they brand animals?
Mhm.
Hmm?
They ran cows.
Cows, bulls. You know when they brand them?
When they own them.
And not just when they own.
To let people know that that's theirs and to give it back if it gets lost.
The only time they brand them is after they bring the bull. They train them, they train them, they train them, they train them. When the bull becomes fully equipped, like you know for sure this bull is fully trained, they brand them. That means if you see a branded bull, that means that is good for work. It comes to your life to a point that if it takes so much of breaking in you, so much of brokenness in you to put you on your knees, to the point that you would come to his presence in fear and trembling. You know what brings that animal, that fear? Continuous suffering, continuous suffering, like they put through trial. And finally, that comes to complete obedience. To the point, every time it's self, its pride, its strength rises up, there is something that goes through their heart like a sword, a fear. No. Your flesh rises up, or your self rises up, or your something in you rises up to do something that is not in the will of God. The moment that rising happens, there is a fear that goes like a sword through your heart. That word is used in the Bible. I'm not going to go into it very much today. That fast, and I said, nope, I can't turn that direction. I do not want to go through it. That fear is a reverential fear. It's not a fear out of but it's a trembling before God and saying, Lord, humble, I surrender. And that reverential fear, that should be continuously in us. Okay, so from there we go forward. Now Revelation 7:17, he will guide to the springs of waters of life. Revelation 7:17, he will guide you to the springs of waters of life. So there should be an overflow in your life of abundance of life. Life defines a lot of things. One is blessings. When you open your mouth, that's what we'll be talking on next. That is well of life, right? We'll go into well of life. Proverbs 10:11. Proverbs 10:11. And one of you can read. This is well of life, right? John 4:14 and James 3:11. So Proverbs 10:11, John 4:14, and James 3:11. This is emphasizing on well of life, right? Okay. We are going to connect words together. So I want everybody to, in an early morning, fresh mind, learn to connect the word. That is a mystery. When you connect the word together, you see God's hidden mysteries revealed. And that's how he establishes the word. That is the amazing mystery of God. Okay. Proverbs 10:11, it talks about mouth of righteous, right? Read it for me.
The mouth of the righteous is a well of life.
Mouth of the righteous is a well of life. Bible also uses righteous in many references. One of the things of a righteous man is the mouth of the righteous. There is a verse in the Bible that says, out of the abundance of your heart, your mouth speaks. That means your heart is filled with something, that's what your mouth speaks, right? When your heart is filled up with whatever it is, your mouth speaks. That's a declaration of what is in you. Abundance of your mouth. The mouth of the righteous speaks life. Then James 3:11.
Does the fountain send out from the same opening both fresh and bitter water?
Can fresh and bitter water come from the same fountain? We talked about fountain of life, right? What are the fountains of your life? Your children are one of the fountains, right? Your words are one of the fountain, right? So everything that comes out of you, springs out of you, is fountains, right? Now, here we talk, well. Fountain is outside, it comes out of you. But if your well is not clean, I'm going down to the bottom. If your well is not clean, what comes out of the fountain matters. How can curse and blessing go from the same mouth? The next verse is, how can a fig tree bear olive or a grapevine produce fig? Now, grape, fig, and olive, I'm not going to go into that topic. There are three signs of people of God: religion, their nation, and their spirituality, their direction, the spiritual. That's why these three fruits are very important. That's why it's mentioned in that angle. However, how can this happen? How can thorn and fruitful wine or whatever doesn't come together? How can bitterness and blessings, or curse and blessing, come from the same fountain? That means what comes out of your mouth is abundance of your heart. In John 4:14, it talks about well of eternal life. This is the story of a Samaritan woman, right? And the whole context is a historic context where, you have to follow me very carefully, Samaritan woman's story, we read Jesus going all the way to the well, right? Whose well is that? That's a well of, that mentions that it is a well of Jacob, right? Now, when we go into the history of that Jacob's well, it has a whole history. It was owned by Hamor, where Abraham first bought it. Then what is their name? Abimelech and his people, they closed it, they took it back. Their people were trying, and then we see the continuously, Isaac comes back and he starts opening up the wells back again. Goes on opening, and he goes from there. And as he opens, it's like, Lord, every fountains I open, enemy come in, shut it down. Every time I try to do something, enemy shuts it down. Then all of a sudden, one day, Isaac goes and digs the well. He reaches a place called Rehoboth. Rehoboth means I found a room. That means the first time, enemy never stopped him. Rehoboth. Right? From that time on, enemy never came to open it up. Shut it down. That's a new beginning, right? Everybody needs one room in their life, one point where you've been pushing, you've been trying, and your enemy shuts it down. You open it up, shuts it down, open it up. My father gave money for it, and he bought it. Man, still not. Shut it down, Rehoboth. And from there, every wells he opened was good. Finally reaches a point called Beersheba. He opens from Rehoboth. Rehoboth means I found a room. From there, he goes on to Beersheba. Beersheba means Ber. Any wells, any springs that starts with Ber and El. There are two fountains in the Bible. Any fountains that starts with El, that means eternal. Beersheba is temporary. Beersheba, where he opens the well. Wells, multiple wells, 7 springs, not one spring, 7 springs. So, started flowing. Do you know that when when blessing starts flowing from you, you will see beginning, a little opening, and you start things flowing out of you, and it still flows from that little place. It goes to the place of seven springs. It continues to flows. That's where it comes to John, where Jesus come to this Samaritan woman and opens up the history, past history of a fountain of life. This fountain is a generational blessing. Now, this generational blessing is the issue they are dealing with. This woman has a problem of a relationship. Other one was mouth, right? What you speak. Here is a relationship-based issue, moral issue. Now, God had to clean Abraham. God had to clean Isaac. And it goes on to Jacob. Jacob finally makes a commitment with the Lord, and he pays the money, and he finally owns that well. And you see in book of Genesis, he paid and he bought it. Then from Jacob, it goes to the blessing. When Joseph was blessed, he says, how can I bless you? And this was the best blessing he had to give. He said, I'll give you this. He said, I don't need anything. Joseph said, I don't need any blessing because I've been abundantly blessed. Do one thing, bless my children. When they were blessing his children, Ephraim gets this blessing. Manasseh and Ephraim is his two children. Ephraim gets this blessing. In book of Joshua, Ephraim, what he does is he says, you know what? I got so much blessing. Let Aaronites, all the Aaron's children, they don't have any blessing. Let them own it. So when they die, they can bury their dead here. They can have this place. And it goes to the tribe of a priest. And it goes on and on and on. The blessing flows. It's a generational blessing. Even if you come to a point that your blessing stops, through you it will still continue. It's a blessing that cannot be stopped. And it comes to the Samaritan woman, is Samaritans who are out of the tribe. They need this blessing.